Imagine you borrow $1 from your friend. Then you borrow another dollar to pay back the first dollar. Then you borrow two more dollars to pay back that dollar. Now imagine the entire world does this for 50 years. Right now, the world owes $315 trillion. That's 315 trillion. To put that in perspective, if you earned $1 every single second, it would take you 10 million years to count that high. Your grandparents bought their homes with cash they saved from their jobs. But now, you'll need to borrow money for 30 years just to afford a starter home. So, what changed? This is the story of how debt went from being a helpful tool to becoming the entire foundation of modern life, and why nobody talks about it. Let's go back to 1971, August 15th to be exact. President Nixon appeared on TV and said something that would change everything. He announced that America would no longer trade dollars for gold. Now, you might be thinking, so what? Well, here's the thing. For the previous 27 years, every dollar was connected to real gold sitting in a vault. If you had $35, you could trade them for 1 ounce of actual gold. But after Nixon's announcement, the dollar was just paper. It was only valuable because everyone agreed it was valuable, like monopoly money, except real. Now here's where things get interesting. Without gold holding them back, governments could create as much money as they wanted. Need money for a war? Print it. Need money for roads? Print it. Want to win an election? Print money and send everyone checks. Let me give you an example of how crazy this got. Imagine you have a credit card with no limit. Every month, you spend more than you earn. But instead of paying it off, you just get another credit card. You use the second card to pay the first card. Then you get a third card to pay for the second card. Then a fourth card to pay the third. Eventually, you're not even buying anything new anymore. You're just moving debt around in circles. That's exactly what governments started doing after 1971. By the 1980s, countries like the US were borrowing money just to pay the interest on old borrowing. Japan did the same thing, then Europe, then everyone. It's like a financial game of musical chairs, and the music is still playing, for now. But governments learned, you can't just print money without consequences. So, they came up with something clever. Instead of printing cash, they printed debt. They created IOUs called bonds, and people bought these IOUs thinking they'd get paid back later, with interest. In 1971, total world debt was $11 trillion. By 2000, $87 trillion. By 2024, $315 trillion. The global economy didn't grow 28 times bigger. So where did all this debt come from? The secret ingredient? Interest rates. In the 1980s, if you borrowed money, you'd pay 15% or even 20% interest. That's expensive. So people borrowed carefully. But then interest rates dropped, lower and lower. By 2020, interest rates were basically zero. When borrowing money is free, what do you think happens? Everyone borrows. Now let's talk about companies. In the 2010s, something weird started happening. Big corporations borrowed billions of dollars, but they didn't use it to make better products. They didn't use it to pay workers more. They used it to buy their own stock. Why would they do this? Because when a company buys its own stock, the stock price goes up. And guess who gets paid based on stock prices? The executives. So they borrowed money from the future to make themselves rich today. This created something economists call zombie companies. These are businesses that don't make enough money to survive, but they keep existing because they keep borrowing. They're not alive, but they're not dead. They're undead. Here's a real example that might surprise you. There was a retail company called Toys R Us. You probably remember it, the big toy store with the giraffe mascot. In 2017, it went bankrupt. But here's the weird part. People were still buying toys. The stores were still making sales. So why did it die? Because years earlier, some investors bought the company using borrowed money. They loaded Toys R Us with $5 billion in debt. The company had to pay $400 million a year just in interest. That's $400 million that couldn't go to employees or stores or better products. It all went to paying back loans. Eventually, the debt crushed them. And this wasn't unique. It happened to Sears, Borders Books, Radio Shack, profitable companies killed by debt they didn't even choose to take on. And the investors who loaded them with debt? They made millions before the companies collapsed. But it's not just companies. Regular people are drowning in debt too. Student loans in America? $1.7 trillion. Credit card debt? Over $1 trillion. Car loans? $1.6 trillion. Your parents worked a summer job and paid for college. You'll be paying off your degree until you're 40. And it's even worse for poor countries. Many developing nations borrowed money to build roads, schools, and hospitals. Sounds good, right? Here's the problem. They borrowed in US dollars, not their own currency. So when the dollar gets stronger, their debt becomes impossible to pay back. Countries like Sri Lanka, Lebanon, and Zambia have already collapsed. Their governments couldn't pay their debts. Banks closed. Money became worthless. People couldn't buy food. All because of debt they took on 10 or 20 years ago. Then 2020 happened. COVID shut down the entire world economy. Governments panicked. They did the only thing they knew how to do: print money. Lots of it. America printed 40% of all dollars ever created in just 18 months. And for the first time in 40 years, something broke. Inflation came back. All that money printing finally had consequences. Milk got expensive, eggs got expensive, everything got expensive. Your paycheck stayed the same, but suddenly it could buy half as much. Let me show you what this looked like in real life. In 2019, a dozen eggs will cost about $1.40. By 2023, over $4. That's not a small increase, that's triple. A house that cost $300,000 in 2020 now costs $450,000. Used cars went up 40%. Rent went up 30%. But here is the most serious part. Your salary probably went up maybe 5%. So you're earning a little bit more, but everything costs way more. This is what inflation really means. It's not just numbers on a screen. It's your money losing power. A dollar today buys what 70 cents bought 4 years ago. And most people don't even realize it's happening. They just feel poorer, and they are. All because governments printed too much money for too long. The bill finally came due, and regular people are the ones paying for it. So central banks did something they hadn't done in decades. They raised interest rates fast. In just 18 months, rates went from 0% to over 5%. They had to slow down inflation. But remember all that debt everyone borrowed at 0%? Now it has to be paid back at 5%. And that's when things started breaking. Remember those zombie companies? When interest rates were 0, they could keep borrowing. But at 5%, they can't afford the interest payments. So they started dying. Bankruptcies, layoffs, closures. In 2023, 3 major banks collapsed in a single week. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic. Gone. Why? Because they made loans when rates were 0. And now those loans were worthless. Here's where we are right now. The US government pays more money in interest than it spends on the entire military. Read that again. Interest payments are now the biggest expense. They're not building anything. They're not helping anyone. They're just paying interest on old debt. And this is your life now. You work. You earn money. But a third of it goes to debt payments. Student loans, credit cards, mortgage, car payment. You're running on a hamster wheel. And the wheel isn't slowing down. So what happens next? There are really only 3 options. Option 1. Everyone defaults. Just stop paying. This causes depression. Option 2. Print so much money that the debt becomes worthless. But this destroys savings. Option 3. Keep borrowing more to pay off old debt. Just kick the can down the road. Guess which one they're choosing? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The global economy is built on a foundation of debt that can never be fully repaid. We're not in a crisis. We're in the endgame of a 50-year experiment. The question isn't if this changes. The question is when, and how much it will cost. Debt always gets paid, either by the borrower or by everyone else. And right now, we're all on the hook. So what can you do about it? Understand how the system works. Make smart choices with your own debt. And prepare for a world where money works very differently than it does today. Because that world is coming, faster than you think. Alright, that's enough. And one thing I want to share. This is our first video on this channel. We're just getting started. Thanks for being here at the beginning.